Hello, and welcome to your YouTube channel, Learn English Lab. Today's podcast topic name is The Real Art of Conversation is not only to say the right thing at the right place, but to leave unsaid the wrong thing at the tempting moment.
That is quite the title, right? But it's so incredibly true.
It really is. And I want you, the listener, to just imagine this scenario for a second. You're standing at this busy networking event, or maybe you're just at a local coffee shop waiting for your order.
Oh, I know exactly where this is going.
Right. You've just given this perfectly fine answer to a question someone asked you. The other person nods, they smile, and then just nothing.
Just absolute dead air.
Exactly. The silence stretches out 1 second, then 3 seconds, 5 seconds. Your heart rate is suddenly spiking. You can practically feel the cortisol just flooding your whole system.
It's the worst feeling. You're frantically searching all those filing cabinets in your brain for a word, any word at all.
Yeah.
A topic, a joke, but the drawers are completely empty.
They're bare. So you give this pained, sort of tight-lipped smile, you quickly break eye contact to desperately check your phone, and the connection just completely evaporates.
Yeah, that is a deeply visceral and honestly an incredibly universal horror story. I mean, it triggers an actual evolutionary threat response in our bodies.
Which is wild to think about.
It really is. And it's entirely relevant to you, the listener, right now. Because whether you are, say, an intermediate English learner trying to hold your own in a brand new cultural environment, or even if you're a native speaker who's just always felt a little clunky in casual settings, this deep dive is designed for you.
We really want to cure that panic.
Exactly. We're going to permanently cure that specific feeling of panic. We're decoding the invisible mechanics of human connection. We want to take you from someone who merely survives social interactions, to someone who genuinely thrives in them.
I really want to figure out why that panic happens in the first place. Because, it happens to brilliant, highly capable people all the time.
Oh, absolutely it does. It has nothing to do with intelligence.
Right. So, to ground this, let's look at a specific case study we found in our research. Let's talk about Marcus.
Ah, yes, Marcus. I love this example.
So Marcus is a 28-year-old software engineer. He recently moved from Sao Paulo, Brazil to Austin, Texas to work for this mid-sized tech company.
And the context here is super crucial, right? Mm-hmm. Marcus's technical English is absolutely flawless.
Yeah, he reads complex documentation. He writes these incredibly articulate emails. He understands literally every word spoken in the engineering meetings.
But casual, unstructured conversation feels like an alien language to him. He has mastered the vocabulary and the grammar, but he is just completely missing the underlying music of the interaction.
That is such a good way to put it, the music.
Yeah, and this is incredibly common, not just for language learners, but also for highly analytical native speakers. They treat language purely as a vehicle for data transfer, right?
Yeah.
Rather than a tool for social bonding.
Okay, so let's look at his first day. He is in the break room. He's pouring a cup of coffee. And in walks David. David is this tall, very outgoing, super friendly coworker.
The classic overly friendly office guy.
Exactly. David gives him this massive smile and says, "Hey, you must be the new guy. Marcus, right. Welcome aboard, man. How's Austin treating you so far?"
Which, by the way, is the quintessential warm American greeting. It is not actually a request for a detailed meteorological or geographical report about Austin.
Right, he doesn't want the weather forecast.
Exactly. It is a social bid. It is literally an invitation to play.
But Marcus doesn't see it as a game at all. He sees it as a data request. So he replies, he just says, "Good. It's good."
Ouch. A completely closed door.
And what follows is that agonizing 7 seconds of staring at the coffee machine. David nods. Marcus nods. They sip their coffee in this excruciating silence.
I'm cringing just thinking about it.
Finally, David mercifully ends it by saying, "Well, cool, see you around," and he just walks out. And Marcus is left standing there, his stomach completely in knots, replaying the interaction.
He knows he should have asked a question or, shared a detail about his apartment search, but in that exact moment, he just didn't have the tools to access those thoughts.
So what is actually happening there? Why did David leave so fast?
Well, what Marcus triggered in David is a psychological phenomenon known as conversational fatigue.
Conversational fatigue?
Yeah. Think of a conversation as carrying a heavy piece of furniture together. If one person feels like they're doing all the heavy lifting, constantly throwing out lifelines, asking questions, offering all the energy.
And the other person is just letting their end drag on the ground.
Exactly. The initiator simply gets tired, they drop the furniture and walk away. Marcus was not trying to be rude. He wasn't arrogant. He just lacked the mechanical tools to carry his half of the social weight.
So we came across this quote from a communications professor at UT Austin that I think Marcus eventually realized. The quote is, "Great conversationalists are not great talkers, they're great responders."
That's the whole secret right there.
I want to introduce a way of visualizing this that might help. Because right now, Marcus is basically treating conversation like a frantic game of Tetris.
Oh, the Tetris analogy, yeah.
Yeah, the blocks are falling faster and faster, the silence is building up, and he is just panicking, trying to find the perfect intellectual block to fit into the gap before it's game over.
It's stressful, it's solitary, and in his own mind, it's highly competitive.
Exactly, it's terrible.
That is a much more accurate framework than the usual sports analogies we hear, like ping pong or tennis. If you treat a chat as a performance, where you're graded on how witty or interesting you are, your cognitive load is entirely focused inward.
Your brain is basically screaming, what do I say next? Do I sound smart? Is my accent weird?
Exactly. And when your attention is directed inward like that, you are literally blind to the social cues the other person is offering you.
So how do we stop playing Tetris? Because I definitely play conversational Tetris sometimes.
We shift to building a Lego set together.
Okay, Legos. I like that.
Yeah, when you build Legos with someone, there's no timer. There's no winning or losing. You simply pick up a block, which could be a piece of information, a feeling, an observation, and you hand it to the other person to see what they build with it.
So your focus shifts completely to your partner.
Precisely. And ironically, the moment you focus on what the other person is building, the performance pressure on yourself completely evaporates.
That makes a ton of sense conceptually. But how do we actually start building the Lego set? Like, what is the operating system that makes this happen smoothly?
The foundational operating system relies on a shift from competition to collaboration. We see this fail constantly in everyday life through something called the one-up.
Oh, the one-up. Everyone knows a one-upper.
We all do.
Yeah.
So imagine someone tells you, I just got back from a trip to Colorado. The mountains were incredibly beautiful.
I know exactly what the Tetris player does here. They search their brain for their own mountain data and they say, oh yeah, well, I went to Switzerland last year. The Alps are way bigger.
Which instantly deflates the other person. It's the worst.
Right, because the competitive responder has just communicated, hey, my lived experience is more valuable than yours.
Exactly. A collaborative responder, a Lego builder, does the exact opposite. They honor the shared reality. They might say, Colorado is stunning.
Right.
What part did you visit? Did you get a chance to do any hiking?
So they are taking the block the person offered and helping them place it on the board.
Yes. But this brings up a good point. You might be wondering, what if I don't actually care about Colorado?
Yeah, I feel like people have a really highly tuned radar for fake interest. If I'm just asking obligatory questions to be polite, won't they feel that?
They will absolutely feel it. Humans are exceptionally good at detecting when someone is just waiting for their turn to speak.
It's so painfully obvious.
It is. This is why the second core component of the operating system is cultivating genuine curiosity. Marcus, our software engineer, eventually realized that he didn't need to fake an interest in American football to talk to David.
Oh, that's interesting. So what did he do?
He could be genuinely curious about the culture of American football. He started asking his coworkers about their Austin weekends, not to check a polite box, but to actually understand the sociology of his new city.
Oh, I see. So genuine curiosity transforms standard, painful small talk into authentic connection because you no longer have to manufacture your engagement.
Exactly. You find the angle that actually interests you. And that ties into how we process what the other person is saying, which is principle number 3.
Listening to respond, not to reply. I've noticed that most of the time when someone is talking, I'm already formulating my reply in my head before they even finish their sentence.
Which means you aren't listening. You are just waiting. There is a massive psychological distinction between listening to reply and listening to respond.
Okay, break that down for me.
A reply is reactive and surface level. A response is intentional and pulls on the emotional threads of what was just shared.
Let's test this. I'll give you a scenario. I come into work and I tell you, man, I tried to make homemade pasta last night. It was an absolute disaster. There was flour everywhere. The dough was horribly sticky. And my dog actually ended up eating half the noodles right off the kitchen floor.
Okay, so if I am just listening to reply, I take the most superficial data point from your sentence, which is pasta, and I say, oh, I love Italian food. My favorite place is downtown.
And I feel completely ignored. I just gave you a chaotic, funny story about my dog and my kitchen failure, and you made it about a restaurant downtown.
Because a reply is a dead end. it shuts it down. But if I listen to respond, I look at all the Lego blocks you just handed me. The flower, the frustration, the dog.
What do you say instead?
I might say, that is hilarious that your dog got involved. What on earth inspired you to try making pasta from scratch on a Tuesday night?
And suddenly we are having a real conversation about my sudden burst of culinary ambition rather than just listing Italian restaurants.
Exactly. You are validating the narrative they chose to share. This is closely related to the fourth principle, which is the rule of yes and from improvisational comedy.
Yes, and I love improv rules.
They apply so well to real life. When a scene partner introduces an idea, you accept its reality, that is the yes, and you add new energy to it, that is the and.
I see people use yes, but all the time, though. Someone says, I'm thinking about running a marathon this year. And the response is, yes, but the training takes up your whole weekend and it destroys your knees.
Ugh, yes, but is such a wet blanket. It is a subtle, socially acceptable way of shutting down someone's enthusiasm.
Right, it's super discouraging.
A yes and response would be, that is an amazing goal. Have you already picked out which race you want to do, or are you still just mapping it out? You keep the balloon in the air.
Okay, I agree with all of this so far, but I have to push back on one major thing, which brings us to Principle 5.
Okay, let's hear it.
I've read that a key part of great conversation is letting silence exist. But wasn't silence exactly what caused Marcus's agonizing break room trauma? How can silence be a tool if it's also the source of the panic?
That's a great observation. It comes down to the physiological state underlying the silence. We had to differentiate between an anxious silence and a confident pause.
So there's a difference.
A huge one. The break room silence was highly anxious. Both Marcus and David were radiating discomfort. Their eyes were probably darting around. Their shoulders were tense. They were desperately looking for an escape hatch.
So it's not the absence of words that's the problem. It's the body language that accompanies the absence of words.
Primarily, yes. A confident pause is a tool of profound social comfort. In many Western cultures, and particularly in deep, trusting friendships, natural beats of silence are used to let complex thoughts settle.
That makes sense.
If a topic momentarily concludes, and you maintain relaxed eye contact, perhaps nod slightly or take a slow, thoughtful sip of your drink, you are sending a subconscious signal. You're saying, I am comfortable here with you. I am not panicking. We don't need to fill the air with noise to justify our presence.
Wow, so that physical grounding turns a terrifying void into a moment of shared peace.
Exactly.
That is a relief to hear because sometimes the brain really is just empty for a second. But let's move to section 3, the toolkit. Let's say the pause stretches a bit too long and I really do need to restart the engine. If I am Marcus and my mind goes blank, what is the absolute easiest, lowest effort ripcord I can pull to save the interaction?
The most reliable tool in human communication, technique number 1, is the follow-up question. But it is vital to understand that not all questions are created equal.
Break those down for me.
You have 4 distinct avenues you can take, depending on the context of the conversation. First, you have detail-seeking questions. If someone mentions a trip to New York, you ask, which borough did you spend the most time in? This shows active listening.
Okay, detail-seeking. Got it. What's the second?
Second, you have emotion-seeking questions. If they tell you about a presentation they gave to the board, you ask, wow, were you nervous walking into that room? This invites vulnerability.
I imagine opinion-seeking is the third, because people love giving their opinion.
They absolutely do. If they mention trying a new restaurant, you ask, would you actually recommend it, or is it just overhyped?
Then the fourth.
Connection-seeking. This looks for the origin story. Like, how did you get into rock climbing in the first place?
But what if my brain is so frozen that I can't even formulate a coherent follow-up question? What if the Tetris blocks are piling up too fast?
Then you utilize technique number 2, a psychological hack called the echo technique.
The echo technique.
Yes. You simply isolate the last key phrase the person said, and you repeat it back to them with an upward, inquisitive inflection.
Give me an example of how that sounds.
Let's say a coworker sighs and says, I can't believe the marketing project got canceled at the last minute. You don't need to invent a brilliant response. You simply say, canceled at the last minute.
I'm going to be honest. If I just sit there repeating people's words back to them, aren't I going to sound like a creepy parrot?
Whoa.
Or worse, like an FBI interrogator shining a lamp in their face?
That is the exact danger if you do it with a flat robotic tone. The echo technique only works if it is infused with genuine intrigue or surprise.
So tone is everything here.
Tone matters immensely. But the reason it is so powerful lies in how the human brain resolves patterns. When you repeat their phrase with an upward inflection, their brain perceives an incomplete loop. It perceives an informational gap.
So they naturally want to fill it.
They feel a psychological compulsion to fill that gap with more context.
Oh, I see. So if I say canceled at the last minute, their brain rushes to explain. They say, yeah, it was a total mess. The director walked in and said the budget was slashed. Boom, the story continues. And the beauty of it is that it requires literally zero cognitive load from me. I just handed the microphone back to them.
Exactly. However, your point about sounding like an interrogator brings us to the necessary counterbalance.
Yeah.
If you only ask questions and you only echo, the other person will eventually feel scrutinized.
Because they are putting all their cards on the table and I'm hiding mine.
Right. You have to offer some of your own Lego blocks. Which brings us to technique 3. We call this the share and bounce back rhythm. It is a 3-step waltz: acknowledge, share, and bounce.
Let's role play this. Let's say I tell you, I'm so exhausted today. We just adopted a rescue dog over the weekend.
Okay, step 1, I acknowledge your reality. I say, oh, wow, congratulations, that is huge. Step 2, I share a brief, low-stakes piece of my own life. My neighbor actually has a rescue pit bull, and she's the sweetest dog on the block.
And step 3?
Step 3, I bounce the focus back to you with a question. What kind of mix did you end up getting?
That feels incredibly natural. By sharing that tiny detail about your neighbor, you prove that you are a participant in the conversation, not a detective.
Exactly.
But you kept it brief enough that you didn't steal my spotlight. You bounced it right back to my new dog.
It creates an equitable distribution of conversational weight. But what happens when the topic of the rescue dog is exhausted? What happens when the silence returns, but you still want to keep talking?
This is where I usually fail. We've talked about the dog, we've talked about the weather, the car is out of gas. How do I change lanes without it feeling like a jarring, sudden swerve?
You use technique 4. Bridge phrases. These are the linguistic on-ramps to a new highway. Phrases like, speaking of which, or that actually reminds me.
Or even a transparent transition to totally change the subject for a second.
Yes, that reminds me is magic, because it implies a logical connection even if there barely is one.
But what if I have absolutely nothing to transition to? My mind is still completely blank.
Then you anchor yourself in the present physical environment using technique 5, an observation opener. You stop looking inside your head and you look at the room around you.
So just pointing something out.
Right. If you were standing in a cafe with a colleague, you might observe, I keep seeing people order that bright purple lavender latte. Have you ever tried it? I'm honestly a little scared of it.
I love that because it creates an instant shared reality. We are both looking at the purple drink. We are now a team evaluating the cafe's weird menu.
It is deeply inclusive. Now, if you want to elevate the energy of a conversation, if it's starting to feel a bit monotone or dry, you can inject technique 6, what we call a story hook.
I assume this isn't a 10-minute monologue about my childhood.
Far from it. The story hook is a micro-narrative, highly sensory, and usually lasting less than 20 seconds. Let's say someone asks you about your commute. Instead of the standard traffic was bad, you use a story hook.
What's an example?
You say, traffic here is wild. Last Tuesday, I got completely stuck behind a dinosaur parade that I didn't even know was happening. I just sat in my car for 45 minutes watching 30 inflatable T-Rexes walk down Main Street.
That is a conversational defibrillator. It shocks the interaction back to life. It's visual, it's absurd, and it leaves so many handles for the other person to grab onto.
They can ask about the parade, they can laugh at the visual, or they can share their own bizarre traffic story. It invites playfulness.
So what's technique 7?
Another highly effective tool for injecting warmth into an interaction is the compliment and question combo.
Well, a compliment seems straightforward, like, I like your jacket.
It is, but a standalone compliment can actually create an awkward roadblock. If you say, I like your jacket, the other person says, thank you, and then the dreaded silence returns.
Because they don't know where to take it from there without sounding boastful.
Precisely. So you have to attach a doorway to the compliment. You attach a question that allows them to elaborate. I love that jacket. Is it vintage, or did you find it locally?
Or in a high-stakes professional setting, maybe something like, you are always remarkably calm during these intense budget meetings. What is your secret for not getting stressed out?
Yes, you are handing them a compliment, but you are also handing them permission to talk about themselves without feeling arrogant. That is brilliant.
What about taking the conversation to a deeper level, like moving past the small talk entirely?
For that, you deploy techniques 8 and 9, hypotheticals and backstories. Hypotheticals are wonderful because they bypass the mundane data of daily life. You might ask, If you won the lottery tomorrow, what is the very first completely irresponsible thing you would buy?
I love that because there are no wrong answers to a hypothetical. It relieves all the pressure, and it tells you so much about their values. The person who buys a sports car is very different from the person who buys a private island for rescue dogs.
Exactly. And asking for a backstory achieves a similar depth. If you notice a colleague is strictly vegetarian, or perhaps they're wearing a very unique piece of jewelry, you don't just ask where they got it. You ask, is there a story behind that necklace?
Is there a story behind that? What a powerful phrase. It tells the person that you don't just see them as a two-dimensional coworker, you see them as a complex human with a narrative.
Which leads to the final and arguably most endearing mechanical tool, number 10, the graceful shift via a callback.
A callback, like in stand-up comedy.
Similar, yes. This happens in a subsequent conversation. You run into the person a week later and you seamlessly reference a previous detail. Hey, how is that 5K training going that you mentioned last week? Did you survive the long run?
Oh, that's great. That proves that I wasn't just hearing them, I was actively listening, retaining the information, and I cared enough to check back in. That builds deep trust.
It absolutely does.
Okay, we have theorized enough. We have the Lego blocks. I want to test this in the wild. Let's do a live field guide, which is section 4. I want you to throw some curveballs at me across different domains of life, and I'll try to navigate them using these mechanics.
All right, let's start in the professional arena. You were in the office kitchen. It is Sarah's first week. She moved here from Denver. She is clearly overwhelmed. You walk in. I will play Sarah.
Okay. I walk in, smile warmly. Hey, Sarah, welcome to the floor. How is your first week going so far?
I sigh and say, honestly, it's a lot. I'm just trying to remember everyone's names. I think I've introduced myself to the same guy 3 times.
Okay, she handed me a vulnerability block. I'm going to use share and bounce back to lower the stakes. I'd say, oh, please don't worry about that. In my first month, I accidentally called the regional director by the wrong name for 2 solid weeks. Nobody expects you to have it down yet. What kind of agency were you at back in Denver?
It was a much smaller boutique marketing firm. We only had about 15 people, so this corporate environment is a huge culture shock.
I'll use the echo technique mixed with curiosity. A boutique firm. That sounds like a really tight-knit environment. What made you decide to make the jump to a massive tech company in Austin?
Boom. Notice what just happened. I gave you short, slightly anxious answers. But by sharing your own embarrassing story and echoing my background, you validated my anxiety and then pivoted the spotlight to my expertise.
That felt really smooth. Let's escalate the difficulty. Let's go to a networking event. These are notoriously awkward. I walk up to a high-top table where Lisa, a UX designer, is standing alone.
You don't want to sound transactional. How do you open?
I use an observation opener with a bit of self-deprecation. I have to admit, half the reason I come to these events is because they always cater from that bakery downtown. Have you tried the croissants yet?
Lisa laughs. I have. They are dangerous. I'm Lisa, by the way. I'm a UX designer working on a new mental health app.
Here is where I need to apply informed curiosity rather than just saying cool. So I'd say a mental health app. That is such a vital space right now. What stage is the product in? Are you guys in the beta testing phase or already launched?
We are deep in the beta phase, and honestly, reading the user feedback is incredibly nerve-wracking. People are brutally honest.
I'm going to respond, not reply. I can only imagine how intense it is to have your hard work picked apart like that. What has been the most surprising piece of feedback you've received so far?
Flawless. You just transformed a sterile networking moment into a masterclass on her specific professional passion. People love being treated as experts.
Let's do one more professional scenario, a job interview. I am sitting across from Rachel in Seattle. She is the hiring manager. We are settling into the room.
Rachel asks the standard throwaway opening question to break the ice. So, how was your commute in this morning? Did you hit much traffic?
I know that a one-word answer here is a wasted opportunity. I'm going to share, observe, and bridge. I say, it was actually really smooth. I got here a bit early and walked around the neighborhood. The architecture around this building is stunning. How long has the company been headquartered in this specific location?
Rachel brightens up. We've been in this building for about 5 years. We really love the open plan layout. It fosters a lot of collaboration between the departments.
Bridge phrase directly into my professional value. I love hearing that. I was actually reading an article recently about how physical proximity impacts team innovation, which is one of the main reasons I was drawn to this specific role here.
Exceptional. You took a mundane question about traffic, pivoted it to an observation about the environment, and bridged it flawlessly into a demonstration of your cultural fit for the company.
Okay, let's leave the corporate world. Casual encounters with strangers. I'm at the gym. I'm sharing a cable machine with Carlos. He mentions he is exhausted because he's training for a Spartan race.
How do you handle Carlos?
Echo technique. A Spartan race. That is intense. I've seen videos of those mud crawls. What made you decide to sign up for something so punishing?
Carlos wipes his brow and says, "Honestly, man, I turned 40 this year, and I realized I was getting totally out of shape. It has been a deeply humbling few months of training."
I'm going to use a specific compliment plus a question. Well, for what it's worth, the fact that I see you in here grinding 5 days a week speaks volumes. That is some serious mental discipline. How do you find the motivation on the days when everything hurts?
That compliment works beautifully because it is rooted in his behavior, his discipline, rather than a superficial comment about his biceps. It validates his invisible struggle.
What about public transit? This is tricky because people have their defenses up. I'm on the train. A woman named Priya is sitting across from me reading a novel I've been wanting to check out. I want to practice my social skills, but I absolutely do not want to trap her in a conversation if she wants to be left alone.
You definitely need an approach that offers a very clear exit ramp.
Right. So I respectfully interrupt, leaning back slightly to give her physical space. Excuse me, I am so sorry to interrupt your reading, but I keep seeing that book on every bestseller list. Is it actually as immersive as everyone says?
Priya lowers the book. She smiles. It really is. The world building is incredible. I can't put it down.
I use share and bounce back with vulnerability. That is good to hear. I always tell myself I'm going to read on the train commute, but I almost always end up just mindlessly scrolling my phone for 40 minutes. What is the premise of the story?
Brilliant. By admitting your own flaw, the phone scrolling, you lower your status slightly, making you incredibly approachable. And by asking about the premise, you let her geek out about her current interest.
Let's talk about the barista, Zoe in Portland. She is making my coffee. This is a purely transactional moment. How do I humanize it?
You disrupt the expected script.
I step up to the register. Hey, Zoe, I usually just get a black drip coffee, but I'm feeling adventurous today. What is the drink you make for yourself when your shift is over and nobody is watching?
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
You have just transformed Zoe from a robotic service provider into an individual with distinct tastes and a personality. You acknowledged her humanity, which is a rare gift for someone working a grueling service shift.
It's the micro interactions that build the muscle. Finally, let's look at community and romance. The high-stakes emotional stuff. I'm walking to my car, and then I run into my neighbor, Amy. She is walking her new puppy, Luna.
Pets are the ultimate conversational cheat code because people love their animals more than almost anything else.
I kneel down a bit to greet the dog. Amy, Luna is getting so big. What breed is she again? We chat about the dog for a minute. Then I need a bridge phrase to expand the topic so we aren't just staring at the pavement. Actually, speaking of dogs, I saw an alert on the neighborhood app that they are finally opening that new dog park by the creek next month.
Amy is thrilled by this news. Now, how do you close the interaction and solidify the neighborly bond?
I use a callback. Well, I'll let you guys get back to your walk. By the way, how are your kids adjusting to the new middle school? You mentioned last month that the transition was a little rough.
That callback demonstrates continuity. It proves she's more to you than just the lady with the dog.
Let's do one more. I want to tackle the highest stakes scenario of all. The first date.
Oh boy. The pressure cooker.
Exactly. I am sitting in a dimly lit Italian restaurant in Brooklyn. I am across from Jordan. We met on an app. We've been sitting here for 5 minutes. Jordan takes a nervous sip of water and laughs awkwardly. I'm sorry. I am always so terrible at these first date things. I'm a little jittery.
The Tetris player tries to look incredibly cool and confident here, denying the awkwardness.
But the Lego builder validates it. I smile and say, honestly, me too. First dates are always a little terrifying. It feels like a job interview with wine. I'm just glad we are both on the same page.
Vulnerability instantly breeds trust. You have diffused the tension by joining them in it.
Later in the day, Jordan mentions they love this specific restaurant because it has the best tiramisu in the 5 boroughs. I use a playful compliment and a question. I take tiramisu extremely seriously, so I am trusting your judgment here. You seem like you really know the hidden culinary gems in this city. Are you a big foodie?
Jordan lights up and mentions a tiny, unadvertised Thai place hidden behind a laundromat in Queens.
I use the story hook technique to dig deeper. Wait, hidden behind a laundromat. What is the story of how you even managed to discover a place with no sign on the door?
You are inviting Jordan to share an adventure narrative. The flow feels completely natural because every single response you gave was anchored in the reality of what Jordan just said. There were no sudden, jarring topic changes. initiated by panic.
That feels amazing when it works. But to truly excel in all these scenarios across all these domains of life, you need precision in your language. And that brings us to Session 5, the vocabulary of connection. For our language learners and our native speakers alike, having the right words is crucial.
It is. However, a rich vocabulary is frequently misunderstood. It is not about memorizing complex words so you can sound pompous, superior, or academically intimidating. It is about having the precise tool for the specific emotional job.
The analogy I use for this is painting. If you have a very limited emotional vocabulary, it is like trying to paint a detailed portrait of a human face using only the primary colors red, blue, and yellow.
It's going to look pretty basic.
Right. You can slap the paint on the canvas, and people might recognize it as a face, but it's going to look harsh and cartoonish. But a deep, rich vocabulary gives you access to the subtle shades, the indigos, the burnt siennas, the soft ochres. Those complex words are what allow you to capture the actual nuance of human emotion and social dynamics.
That is a beautiful way to frame it. To help our listeners mix those subtle paints, let's look at 25 essential vocabulary words. But rather than just reading a dictionary definition, let's break down their roots and how they practically function in a social setting. We'll start with what we call the positives, or the builders.
These are the traits we want to embody. Words like eloquent, rapport, reciprocate, candid, articulate, empathize, gregarious, affable, succinct, perceptive, and convivial. How do these fit into our conversational toolkit?
Let's weave them into a behavioral context. Many people believe that to be a great conversationalist, you must be the most eloquent or articulate speaker in the room.
Which implies putting on a show.
Right. Eloquent comes from the Latin loqui, meaning to speak, implying a powerful, fluent, and persuasive delivery. But eloquence is a performance trait. What matters far more in daily life is your ability to build rapport, a harmonious, sympathetic connection.
And how do we build that rapport?
You build it when you genuinely empathize with someone's story. Empathy isn't just feeling sorry for someone, it's the ability to cognitively and emotionally place yourself in their shoes.
And you deepen that rapport when you reciprocate their vulnerability by being candid about your own experiences.
Exactly. Candid means being truthful, straightforward, and refreshingly honest, like when you admitted to Priya on the train that you just scroll your phone instead of reading.
I also want to talk about gregarious versus affable. I think a lot of introverts feel doomed because they aren't gregarious.
That is a crucial distinction. Gregarious comes from the Latin grex, meaning a flock or herd. A gregarious person physically seeks out large groups. They are the life of the party, thriving in a flock. If you are an introvert, you do not need to force yourself to be gregarious. You simply need to be affable.
Because affable means being warm, friendly, and easy to approach. You can sit quietly in the corner of a party and still be profoundly affable when someone sits next to you.
Precisely. In fact, if you are highly perceptive, meaning you are acutely observant of other people's micro-expressions and body language, you know exactly when to keep your own points succinct. Succinct means briefly and clearly expressed, without any wasted words.
And a perceptive, succinct, and affable person naturally creates a convivial atmosphere, a space that is friendly, lively, and enjoyable.
That is incredibly empowering for the introverts listening. Now, let's look at the mechanics or the styles of conversation. Words like nuance, anecdote, colloquial, interlocutor, and cadence.
Let's start with interlocutor. That sounds very formal.
It is a formal word for a very simple concept. The person you are talking to, your partner in dialogue. As a skilled interlocutor, your job is to understand the nuance of the room. Nuance refers to a very slight difference in meaning, tone, or expression.
For example, knowing the nuance between a sarcastic joke and a mean-spirited insult.
Exactly. And understanding nuance helps you decide your speaking style. Are you at a formal board meeting, or are you at a backyard barbecue where you should use more colloquial language? Colloquial refers to ordinary, familiar, everyday speech rather than formal language. It puts people at ease.
I also love the word cadence. It originally relates to the rhythm or flow of sounds in music or poetry. Every great chat has a natural cadence to it, a rhythm of high energy, followed by confident pauses, followed by shared laughter.
And to keep that cadence moving, you use an anecdote, a short, amusing, or interesting story about a real incident, like the dinosaur parade in traffic. Anecdotes are the absolute perfect fuel for the share and bounce back technique.
Which brings us to our final category, the pitfalls and the warnings. These are the traits and habits that destroy the cadence of an interaction. Words like tangential, loquacious, taciturn, verbose, digress, platitude, trivial, pontificate, and reticent.
Let's talk about the talkers first. The loquacious and the verbose.
Loquacious shares that same Latin root loqui as eloquent, but it has a negative connotation, right?
It does. A loquacious person tends to talk a great deal, often way too much. They are physically compelled to fill the silence, and when they speak, they are often verbose, using far more words than are necessary to make a point.
We all know someone like this. You ask them how their weekend was, and they digress into a 20-minute tangential story about their aunt's plumbing issues. To digress means to leave the main subject temporarily.
But a loquacious person goes off on a tangent, a completely divergent line of thought, and focuses on entirely trivial or unimportant details, and you absolutely cannot get a word in edgewise.
It is exhausting, but equally exhausting is the person who likes to pontificate. This comes from the word pontiff, or pope. When someone pontificates, they are expressing their opinions in a highly dogmatic, pompous way, as if their word is absolute law.
And worst of all, they often rely on platitude statements that have been used too often to be interesting or thoughtful. A moral cliche.
So if I'm telling you about a really difficult breakup I'm going through, and you pontificate by saying, well, everything happens for a reason, plenty of fish in the sea, you are hitting me with platitudes? It feels incredibly dismissive.
It terminates the emotional connection immediately.
Yeah.
Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum from the loquacious talker is the taciturn or reticent interlocutor.
What is the subtle nuance between those two?
Taciturn describes someone who is habitually reserved and uncommunicative. It is a personality trait. They just don't say much by nature. Reticent, however, usually means being hesitant or unwilling to reveal one's thoughts or feelings in a specific moment, perhaps out of shyness or fear.
So if you are dealing with someone who is reticent, you cannot force them open. You have to use your toolkit, specifically gentle follow-up questions and confident pauses, to give them safe space to step into, rather than overwhelming them with your own words.
That vocabulary breakdown is a masterclass in itself. We've covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have. We have the Lego building operating system, the mechanical toolkit of questions and echoes, the field guide of real-world scenarios, and the precise vocabulary to paint the picture. It is time for the full circle. Let's go back to Marcus and see the cumulative effect of all this work over time.
Let's fast forward. 6 months have passed since that incredibly painful 7-second break room silence. Marcus has been diligently practicing these tools.
He's been doing his homework.
Oh, yeah. He is currently at the company's annual summer picnic at Zilker Park. It is loud. There are 200 people there. And it is a prime environment for social anxiety.
And as Marcus is walking toward the food tents, he spots Anna. Anna is a brand new hire. She just relocated from Buenos Aires, Argentina. And as Marcus looks at her, he sees a mirror image of himself from 6 months ago.
She looks lost, overwhelmed, and she is standing awkwardly near the drink coolers, desperately pretending to look at something on her phone.
We've all done the fake phone scroll. But Marcus does not hesitate. He doesn't play Tetris. He walks right over and initiates the Lego build. He smiles and says, "Hey, you look like you could use a cold drink and a friendly face. I'm Marcus from the engineering team."
He opens with warmth, an observation of her situation, and immediate identification. Anna visibly exhales in relief.
She introduces herself, mentions she is from Buenos Aires and just started on Monday. Marcus instantly uses the share and connect technique. "That is amazing. I am actually from São Paulo, so we are practically neighbors. How is Austin treating you so far?"
Anna laughs a little nervously and mentions that the culture shock is real and everything feels overwhelmingly big here.
Here, Marcus uses humor and a visual anecdote as story hook to lower the stakes. He says, "Just wait until someone takes you out for authentic Texas BBQ. They hand you a plate the size of a small car. It's ridiculous. What specific project did they bring you out here to work on?"
He is seamlessly deploying follow-up questions, humor, sharing his own background, and bouncing the focus right back to her expertise. He is guiding the dance so smoothly, providing so much structure that Anna doesn't even realize she is being led. She feels completely at ease.
And then David, the tall, outgoing guy from Marcus's very first day in the break room, walks over to grab a soda. He watches Marcus effortlessly chatting with the new hire. He remembers how utterly taciturn and closed off Marcus used to be.
David laughs, claps Marcus on the shoulder and says, "Look at you now, man. We can't shut you up." Marcus smiles. He has completely mastered the invisible rhythm.
It is such a beautiful resolution, and it proves the central thesis of our deep dive today. Charisma is not magic. Conversational flow is not an innate genetic trait that you are either born with or denied forever. It is a learned mechanical skill.
Marcus transformed his reality through deliberate practice. Which brings us to the listener's action plan. We are not just going to leave you with theory.
We are challenging you to a 4-week conversational boot camp. If you implement this, your daily reality will literally change.
Week 1. Your singular goal is to ask one follow-up question in every single conversation you have. Make it a non-negotiable rule.
Whether you are talking to your manager, your spouse, or the cashier at the grocery store, listen to what they say and ask one question based on their data.
Week 2. Deploy the echo technique. Once a day, when someone shares a thought or a frustration, simply repeat their key phrase back to them with a tone of genuine curiosity. Observe the psychological effect. Watch how they instantly light up and lean in to provide you with more detail.
Week 3. Try the share and bounce back rhythm at least 3 times. Acknowledge what someone said, share a very brief, low-stakes personal detail of your own to prove you are human, and then bounce a question right back to them to keep the spotlight shared.
Week 4. Master the bridge phrases. Practice transitioning smoothly from a dying topic to a new one, using observation openers or phrases like, "Speaking of which," or "That reminds me." Never let a conversation crash into a wall again. Build an off-ramp.
And as an ongoing habit, try to integrate one of those 25 vocabulary words into your speech or your written emails every single day. Paint with the subtle colors.
If you follow this 4-week plan, you will begin to notice a profound shift. You will notice people lingering longer at your desk. You will notice strangers opening up to you. You will cease being a passive observer of life and become an active, deeply valued participant.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your week.
Consider this idea. What if every single stranger you walk past on the street or sit next to on the train already holds the exact missing piece to a puzzle you didn't even know you were trying to solve?
Maybe it's a piece of career advice, a new perspective on a problem, or just a moment of profound empathy.
And what if the only way to unlock that piece of the puzzle is by leaving the wrong competitive thing unsaid and simply asking the right follow-up question?
The connections are out there, sitting in break rooms and coffee shops, just waiting for us to stop playing Tetris and start building together. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.